The Alabama Supreme Court ruled on Friday that frozen embryos are people and someone can be held liable for destroying them, a decision that reproductive rights advocates say could imperil in vitro fertilization and affect the hundreds of thousands of patients who depend on treatments like it each year. Now, the first of its kind ruling comes as at least 11 states have broadly defined personhood as beginning at fertilization in their state laws, and nationwide, more states are mulling additional abortion and reproductive restrictions. And also in the news today, President Joe Biden said that his administration will announce more sanctions Friday to hold Russia accountable for the death last week of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Biden confirmed the forthcoming package to reporters before leaving for a campaign trip to the West Coast. He says we'll have a major package announcement on Friday. And for the third time, the United States uses veto on the Security Council to kill a resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Washington has proposed an alternative, asking for a halt in fighting as soon as practical. The U.S. says the ceasefire resolution would have jeopardized efforts to broker a hostage release deal. And Nikki Haley, who is trailing Donald Trump in the primary in South Carolina, her home state, says she isn't going anywhere. She has said this behind closed doors at fundraisers. She's reiterated it in recent media appearances, and she's made this statement on the campaign stump in what was perhaps her most forceful speech since she began her presidential campaign last year. She's pushed back against skeptics who have long urged her to drop her long shot bid for the Republican nomination for president. An independent presidential candidate, Robert Kennedy, held a roundtable campaign event with Black leaders Sunday, covering a wide range of issues from police reform to the Israel-Hamas war. But one topic that wasn't broached was his history of spreading vaccine disinformation to the Black community. In fact, in 2021, Robert Kennedy produced a film called Medical Racism, the New Apartheid, which used the real history of medical racism in the United States to peddle conspiracy theories that COVID vaccines were an effort to harm Black communities. He also has peddled conspiracy theories about autism and African American children, all lies and all nonsense. This is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. This is hour 2 of Areva Martin in real time, and this is the hour where we dig a little deeper, where we go behind the headlines, and we bring you those stories that people are talking about. I talked earlier in hour 1 about my trip to St. Louis 2 weeks ago to attend a press conference and a teach-in. And at that press conference, I announced that I'm representing 200 descendants of enslaved people who we now know their labor was used to build one of the most prestigious Jesuit universities in this country, St. Louis University. There are 27 Jesuit universities across the U.S., and for the last 8 to 10 years, they have been engaged in this reconciliation and remembrance project where they are tracing their relationship to slavery. And what they are discovering is not pretty. They are discovering some really horrific and horrible aspects of the Jesuits' involvement with slavery. For many, many years, the Jesuits peddled this notion that somehow they were good slave owners, obviously a misnomer, but they wanted the world to believe that as socially progressive Christians, that they treated their slaves somehow better than other slave owners. But through these remembrance projects and this investigation that they've done, they have revealed that like other owners of enslaved people, they worked them countless hours, they deprived them of food, they broke up their families, they used harsh punishment, including beatings and whippings, in order to force not just adult men and women, but children to do ungodly amounts of work. And in our case, the case of me representing these descendants of enslaved people in St. Louis, we calculated, we used one of the nation's renowned experts to calculate the value of that stolen labor from those enslaved individuals, because the Jesuits did all this great research, but they stopped short. They didn't tell us what the value of that labor is. And renowned expert from University of Connecticut shared that information. He did the calculation, he did the math, he used historical wage data to tell us that the value of the wages that were not paid to these enslaved men and women is somewhere between $363 million to $74 billion. And that's even modest, depending on interest rates that you use and different other calculations. And I think it's so important that as we have these conversations about enslaved people and how they were treated and what happened to them, and we start to trace the lineage to help people learn more about their ancestors, we also talk about the tremendous contributions of enslaved people to the building of this country. And so I'm super excited today. In this hour, I'm going to be talking to John Mills. He is a software architect, a researcher, and a founder of a nonprofit. And he has been doing this work of helping families find their ancestors, their enslaved ancestors. And also in this hour, joining me is Wendy Tyson Wood. She's the president of the Greater Waterbury NAACP. She's been working with John on this project. So we're going to learn about how John got interested in this work, what are some of the discoveries that he's made, what are some of the obstacles, as well as some of the things that he considers victories in this work, and how other people, one of the things that happened in my press conference in St. Louis, are people coming up to me saying, hey, how can I trace my lineage? How can I do a genealogical study to find out who my ancestors were and what contributions they made to the building of this country? So make sure you stick around. We're going to be talking to John and Wendy about this very fascinating topic of discovering our ancestors and their contributions to America when we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
5 minutes, King.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that caring for the community means caring about the climate. You might have heard that we announced a pretty bold 12-month, $2 million campaign to do 4 things: increase climate literacy, turn up the volume on communities of color in the climate conversation, connect everyday people with the resources they need to survive and thrive, and highlight frontline climate justice crusaders of color throughout this year. KBLA Talk 1580 will be bringing you insightful interviews on all of our shows to help raise your climate IQ. Each quarter this year, we will also be hosting free climate events in various communities throughout the city with food, fun, and forward-thinking conversations. Thanks to partners like LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, the Sierra Club, the California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, AQMD, MWD, and more. You'll also be hearing more about a couple of national town halls broadcasting live from Los Angeles, to which you will be invited. And we'll be rolling out a robust social media campaign on all our platforms, as well as an outdoor media campaign, all designed to educate, enlighten, and empower you in our fight for climate justice. Caring about the community means caring about the climate. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that we really can change the world if we care enough.
City of Los Angeles tenants, get informed today about your eviction rights. Take immediate action if you receive an eviction notice from the court. You have 5 days to respond to an eviction notice or unlawful detainer. Don't self-evict. And you can't be evicted for non-payment of rent unless you owe more than the fair market rent for a unit your size. Learn more eviction information such as at-fault and no-fault evictions at housing.lacity.org. Be informed, be protected, be at home.
I have a secret. I use Secret Whole Body Deodorant because more than just my armpits stink.
Oh, can I use it where my bra rubs under my...
Oh, yeah.
And what about down there? You know, my...
Totally. 4 out of 5 gynecologists would recommend it. So I tried it, and now I get 72 hours of freshness from my pits to my...
Ooh, I love that it's a spray.
Me too. And it comes in sticks and creams too. Go get your Secret Whole Body Deodorant.
Some people just know the best places to eat around town. Those are the people who know to choose Allstate. They know exactly where to go to get exactly what you're wanting. They know where to find the spiciest hot pot, the gooeyest brownies, and the tenderest, most flavorful portobello steak. Those people also know that safe drivers save 40% with Allstate.
Saving 40% is based on the national average premium savings for all state auto customers with a clean driving record versus those without. Savings vary by state and vary based on how you buy, subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, Northbrook, London.
We are back, and in this hour, we are talking with John Mills and Wendy Tyson Wood. We're talking about John's very interesting work of investigating and tracking down ancestors of Black folks. These ancestors were mostly enslaved people, or they were African American Civil War veterans. Thank you so much, John and Wendy, for joining me for this segment. As you both heard me talk about, I got really interested in this work as I became the lead attorney with some families, or for some families in St. Louis, Missouri, who are engaged in this kind of work. They were notified by this Jesuit university, St. Louis University, that they were the direct descendants of some enslaved people brought to St. Louis from Maryland for the purposes of building St. Louis University. Tell us, John, how you got involved in this work and how you made the discovery of your ancestors.
No, absolutely. And I appreciate you having me on. Thank you for that. My journey started a long time ago. I'm a child of the 70s. I actually grew up in California. My father was heavy at that time into the Panther movement and the US organization and all that was going out in California at the time. And he used to try to preach into me like this self kind of value in your skin color and your features and all of those things. And then by the time I got into the late 80s, early 90s, and I had my daughter and I was in corporate America, I realized I actually had an unconscious bias against myself, against my own skin color. Like I had to self-interrogate how I was operating around corporate America to come to that conclusion. And once I came to that conclusion, I was a little nervous about raising my daughter in a country with people who may not have come to that same place I had just come to, and thus maybe operating in ways that are holding up tenets of a past time, right? So I was trying to figure out how to attack that. And it took me some years. My sister started doing genealogical research into our family in the late 90s. And my grandfather had passed away in 87. I knew him well, but I didn't know anything about his past. And she started showing me documents of, he had sisters and his parents. I knew nothing about them. He came to California in the Great Migration, never talked about leaving Texas. We found he was chased out of Texas. We found out his brothers and sisters, he was the youngest. They were older. They were born in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He was born in 1911. He was a young hothead. He was in fear of being hung because of the way he was acting. So he fled in the Great Migration in the 30s to California. And so he just never talked about it much. But when we chased it down, my sister chased it down, we found out his grandfather was named Ned Mills, was an enslaved man freed on Juneteenth in Henderson, Texas. And his parents, his mother died in the great flu pandemic in 1918. We had a death certificate, my sister showing me. And we had a cemetery where she was buried at. It was Hickory Grove Cemetery in Kilgore, Texas. So 2003, we flew to Texas. And we get to this cemetery, we walk through it, it's pristine, it's beautiful. We can't find one family member that we know is there in that cemetery until we realize there's this lightly driven path along the side of the cemetery that leads into the woods. And when we walked into the woods, then we started finding people that we had on this tree we had developed. And that was just a spiritual moment for me. It was like an awakening. It was like these people were degraded and segregated in life and death. And not only that, now I had this man named Ned Mills, my great-great-grandfather, that I now knew I got my surname from, only to find out that was just the name of his last enslaver. So now I had to interrogate this name Mills. I was like, wait a minute, I saw that with a DNA kind of component to it. And now I realize it was just, the decision point, a decision probably he didn't make originally, but now, it's this white man's surname. I carry around my legacy into slavery. So that started me on this journey of digging into my own roots, finding enslaved people. My sister found most of them. I started doing work outside of our family later on. But I just started finding many stories like that one. I would find individuals that I was related to. Like, for example, my father, very fair skinned, had been all his life. Everybody was always telling me we had Native American blood Come to find out, it was an Irishman who had raped one of our descendants, and he had Irish blood, right? Like, you start finding all these alignments to things you heard of, but you didn't realize. I guess I should have figured it. I'm an African American man living in America, but I just did not have these deep ties to actual people. These people became real. And once they became real, I wanted to dig up and get this information for other people, hand it off to other people, get them to have the same feeling I had. And that
Let me
started
ask you
that
this,
journey.
John. What did you learn about this enslaver Mills?
Well, there were a lot of them. There was the man by the name of David Mills, another man by the name of Robert Mills. They were brothers. They were really wealthy. They were the largest slaveholders in Texas. So they had over 100 enslaved people. They actually had their own money. It was called Mills money. So I mean, there was a large kind of enslaver where that surname comes from. So he had underneath, in his plantations, he had lots of people that worked as blacksmiths. After my second great grandfather was freed, I see him still operating in farming, but also as a blacksmith. Like he's still operating in that kind of a function. But yeah, this wasn't just like the everyday, just a common enslaver. This was like a very wealthy individual. It also told me that, if I come across another individual by the name of Mills with an enslavement path, it doesn't necessarily mean we're related by, genealogy, because this man owned so many enslaved people that they took on that surname. And, it's just another mechanism of how we kind of lost, our tie into who we are and where we came from. And so, yeah, I wanted to dig into that more. And it was a power when I found all this out, right? There was a power in it. I became really proud of these people, that what they did, their greatness wasn't that they, made a lot of money, or that they were some exceptionalists that conquered some land. Their greatness was that they endured, they persisted. And because they persisted, I exist. Like that's their greatness. So now I wanted to highlight that. Like we don't hear those stories now. We commonly hear the 1 in a million. I wanted to hear the million now. Right. I wanted to hear that side. So those are the people I hunt down. I hunt down the unknown stories of people that people don't really acknowledge or highlight for this strength of endurance. And then I try to tell their stories. And once we dig deep enough to get like a fuller picture, something that has the perspective of an African American, because a lot of the stories that we hear are told based on documentation that was created by white Americans. Right. It was from that context when that information was produced. And so like I wanted to interrogate the documentation that I was researching into my own family and the people that I'm researching. I wanted to interrogate it from my perspective, and I wanted to present it from the descendant of the enslaved perspective. So that's what I do. I present it from that perspective, and then try to find current day descendants to hand it back to.
Let me ask you this, Wendy. When I was in St. Louis, most people felt like John, they wanted this information. They wanted to figure out how they could do their own genealogical study. But there were some who said, why are you doing this? Why do you want to find out about those people that happened so long ago? The people who enslaved them, they're dead. The enslaved people are dead. The people here, the descendants, the beneficiaries of those enslavers, none of those people were there at that time. Have you heard that kind of pushback? And what do you say to those people?
Yeah, most definitely. What I find, there's a fear of the unknown. There's a fear of conflict. There's a resistance to information. And that information is empowering to individuals like myself, who is third generation freed slave. I mean, we're not even talking 100 years, we're talking third generation free slave. It's empowering to individuals who've been denied their history, their culture. I go to a lot of festivals and I marvel at how these festivals celebrate themselves in dance and word. And I also, at the same time, I'm lost because I'll never know my dance. I'll never know our cultural tribal colors. So working with John to bring that information to life is empowering. It's about knowing who you are, knowing where you've been, and knowing how you can navigate in this world as a person of color, a Black woman, a Black male of color. How are you going to navigate this world? Things we can never change. But when you know what they went through and how they survived, you can breathe a little deeper. Like, you're more confident that, you know what, those my people. I have more strength than I think I have. So when I hear comments like, why are you talking about Africans and why are you talking about slavery and slave owners? I said, it's my story. It's my story. I would never deny anyone of the Jewish faith their story of the Holocaust, or the Asians, their story of how they were treated when they came to this country. It's your story. It's how we honor our ancestors and how we prepare our children. It's very important that we prepare our children.
I'm glad you brought up the Holocaust because, John, a lot of Jewish people define themselves as survivors of the Holocaust, or they'll tell you that their grandmother or their grandfather. But as Wendy said, in our community, to talk about being the survivors of the enslaved or of an enslaved person is met with a different attitude. It's not received in the same way. If someone says they're a survivor of a Holocaust, there's almost like an instant deference to that person and the horrors that they experienced in the Holocaust. And clearly the Holocaust was absolutely horrible. 6 million people killed for no reason. But do you see anything changing since you've been doing this work? Are people beginning to recognize that we also are the descendants of a horrific, period, that is deserving of the same level of deference as other survivors?
Well, what I see very clearly in the lectures that I give and the places that I talk are that the African American folks that listen to the stories and the information that we present are recognizing what I recognized early on, and that is I wasn't taught this information. A lot of it was intentionally undocumented and hidden, and so there's a purposeful kind of component to us not really being interested in it. Right. And I think you find that often. There's a lot of African Americans that never even attempt to do this research and know very little about their history. What I've noticed is in doing this, I noticed that individuals of African descent are becoming more interested in finding their own genealogy. And I think that's a win because I see researching your own genealogy and then highlighting and exalting the people that you descend from. That's an act of resistance because you weren't supposed to do that. These people were supposed to be hidden. That was the intent. And so as soon as you start doing that, you're going against the grain. And that I think I definitely see changing as I speak.
And so what you just said was education, that people, a lot of the resistance, the trepidation, the hesitation in discovering this information is because people have not been exposed to it and have been taught that there's something negative about being exposed to it, because that's some of the feedback I was getting, like, why don't you leave that alone? Leave that in the past, as if, again, by discovering it, we are creating, some kind of dissension, that we're being
absolutely
contentious people, we're being divisive just by wanting to know our history.
That's
but
what they
moving
try
forward,
to
I want to
present.
talk about how we further educate people so we can combat those attitudes, and then what people can do to start finding this information out about their own family. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
Thank you.
The right time. More of Areva Martin in no time when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton. Here's the latest on the Black Information Network. Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley was overcome with emotion as she discussed her husband's military service. During a rally in her home state of South Carolina, Haley noted her husband Michael is currently deployed in Africa as she promised to stay in the race for the Republican nomination. Her comments come after Republican frontrunner Donald Trump has lobbied personal attacks against Haley and her husband. Atlanta officials are trying to deal with the homeless problem at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The Atlanta City Council approved a plan to restrict access, but Councilman Byron Amos, who is Black, stresses the restrictions don't apply to everyone. The move comes after growing complaints of homeless people in the terminals. The airport already has rules restricting access from late at night through the early morning hours, but those restrictions could be extended 24/7 if the plan moves forward. That's the latest. I'm Amber Payton on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network.
Drive carefully over in Diamond Bar and watch for the left lane still blocked with a stall on the 60 East after Lemon Avenue, Bray Canyon Road interchange. Heavy traffic continues from Nogales Street. A large pothole remains in the right lane at Baldwin Park 605 South after the 10, and it's causing some damages with some cars on the right shoulder. Heavy traffic flow is coming from Live Oak Road. In Highland Park on the 110 North at Avenue 52, center lane is currently blocked with an accident, and heavy traffic is coming from Figueroa Street.
Shop deals on LG at Lowe's with up to 35% off select major appliances. Plus, save an extra $75 on every $750 you spend on all major appliances. Lowe's knows home improvement. Valid through 2/28. Savings vary based on purchase amount. Exclusions apply. See Lowes.com for more details.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Today's Black History Month sports moment. On October 16, 1968, many people believe the social justice movement in sports was born on this day. In the 1968 Summer Olympics in Mexico City, Tommy Smith and John Carlos sent a message around the world after winning the 200-meter final. Smith won the gold medal. Carlos won the bronze. During the U.S. national anthem, Smith and Carlos stood on the podium with their heads bowed and fists in the air. Both wore black gloves on their fists and took their shoes off to display their black socks. Smith and Carlos were protesting racial injustice in America and the lack of fair housing and educational opportunities for blacks. Smith and Carlos were suspended by the U.S. Olympic Committee, but they got their message across, and their image on that podium will be everlasting. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do Black history every single day. In fact, as the only Black talk radio station west of the Mississippi, we are Black history. Our annual Black History Month luncheon is fast approaching, and we want to be sure to give you ample time to get your company, organization, church, or group to join us at this year's celebration on the last day of the month, Thursday, February 29th at noon. Last year, we honored iconic local Black media personalities, including Pat Harvey, Jim Hill, Mark Brown, Beverly White, Sandy Banks, and Pat Prescott, and raised $20,000 in scholarships. This year, we're honoring Black Hollywood creatives who have used their artistic genius as climate justice champions. This year's luncheon, we will be showcasing and sharing their inspiring work on our big screen, plus a scrumptious meal, live music, great company, and lots of fun with your favorite KBLA Talk 1580 hosts. So contact us today at info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. That's info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. We hope to see you Thursday, February 29th as we close out Black History Month. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black. Your Black.
KBLA Talk 1580, home of the 2024 Climate Justice Campaign.
Oh, this cold.
Honey,
Honey?
you need DayQuil Severe Honey.
DayQuil Severe Honey gives you powerful cold and flu symptom relief with a honeylicious taste because life doesn't stop for a cold.
Okay, I'm ready to go.
Ugh, no, I'm getting a cold.
Honey.
Try DayQuil Severe Honey for powerful cold and flu relief. DayQuil Severe with honey flavor. The daytime coughing, aching, stuffy head, fever, honeylicious, power through your day medicine. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
Hey, Joe Montana here. Back in my football days, I knew the importance of a strong defense. Now I'm sharing how you can help defend your health against pneumococcal pneumonia, a bacterial lung disease that can be life-threatening. If you're 65 or older or 19 or older with certain chronic conditions like diabetes or asthma, you're at increased risk. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist about vaccination and learn more at knowpneumonia.com. That's KNOW pneumonia.com.
Sponsored by Pfizer.
It's KBLA Talk 15. Talk radio. Let's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 15.
We are back, and in this segment, we've been talking about tracing your roots, finding out who your ancestors are. John Mills has been doing that now for some time, and he's working with Wendy Tyson Wood, who is the president of the Greater Waterbury NAACP. They are working on building a statue in Waterbury, that's Connecticut, I believe, in my city's right here, honoring an enslaved ancestor named Fortune. Tell us about that, Wendy. I understand that this enslaved person has quite a history that most people obviously don't know about, and that's what this whole segment is about, educating folks about who some of our ancestors are and feeling confident and proud to embrace that information and then to share it.
Yes, exactly. Fortune was an enslaved African that came to Waterbury and was owned by a family of bone setters, which dealt with the issues of the bones. And that family held him in slavery. And then after he had died, held his bones for over 200 years before they buried him. So last year, John and, came into the conversation about how can we honor him. And, 10 years, we did a 10 years anniversary about Mr. Fortune and his life. As a child growing up in Waterbury, I remember seeing his bones displayed in the museum. Yeah. Not really understanding what it was, not really, knew there was some connection there and totally confused, like, why is this here, over the years. So when you ask the question about how the anger and the fear that comes along with why are we doing this, it's also freeing because the ones who are here today weren't accountable for the ones who were there when they were slaves. So it's a way in which we can start this courageous conversation about how do we heal ourselves and heal this country. So when we do this work, this meaningful work about understanding our history, our past, it's vital. From there, we moved on to an enslaved, unmarked grave in the Silence Bronson Library, putting that on the Freedom Trail, and the courageous individuals who decided to research that. And moving to make that into part of our legacy in the city of Waterbury so that our kids will know that they may not see us in other places, but we are here. We were here before, we were here after, and we will still be here. And our kids, Black and brown kids, especially our Black children, need to know we were here. We helped build this city. We worked these lands with no money, and the significance of the slaves in Connecticut, which people say there was no slaves in Connecticut. There was plenty of slaves in Connecticut. And the significance of that is their journey and how they led a path. These were some bold individuals. I won't call them slaves. They didn't even want freedom. They just wanted to vote. I mean, as we dig through the history of the enslaved in Connecticut, you get encouraged and you're like, well, you know what? I can go a little bit harder today. I can do this a little bit longer today. I can represent a little bit better. So that is what, this individual, but Fortune was phenomenal. And trying to find, even in his death, not being buried with his wife and his children, and just the horrific aspect of slavery is something that, whether we deal with it or not, is as trauma. It's trauma to our DNA. And there's times it's trauma. It's just, you feel it, you don't even know.
It's intergenerational trauma that we're just starting to even call it out as that. And a lot of folks aren't even aware that there is such a thing as intergenerational trauma. Again, we've been led to believe, we've been miseducated, right? We've been given misinformation and in some cases disinformation about our history. So much so that we've internalized a lot of the anti-Blackness that is so pervasive in this country. John, I want to ask you, in the case that I'm representing families in St. Louis, the Jesuits, they found these descendants and wrote them a letter. So you can imagine getting a letter, is this a hoax? Is this real? Someone telling you that they've been able to trace your ancestors and then tell you that your ancestors played such a critical role in the building of one of the most prestigious universities in this country. In any of your work, have you been able to track or trace some of the contributions of these enslaved people that you discovered?
Oh my gosh, yes. To the point that you're making there, actually today, I traced down a descendant who lives in Virginia. My sister actually lives in Virginia. So I sent a package to an Office Depot there so that she could pick it up same day and take it to that descendant. That literally just happened today. But yeah, I do that often. But these were individuals. They were descendant of these two individuals named Mary and Thaddeus Newton. They were enslaved in North Carolina, New Bern, North Carolina. The father was, Thaddeus was enslaved. Mary was free. They had 5 children. She wanted to free her husband. She couldn't figure out how to do it. So she took her children. They fled to New York. They started working with Henry Highland Garnett and a few other abolitionists. They raised the money, went back and purchased her husband's freedom. Then they kept going back, getting other enslaved people. They eventually moved to New Haven, Connecticut, and they had 2 sons who, right about around this time, it's 1863, they had 2 sons who were like, we want to fight for freedom. They're listening to Frederick Douglass talk. They're like, we want to fight for freedom. So one of their younger sons' name was Stephen Newton. He goes to Massachusetts because they had a colored regiment. He joins the 54th. So the movie Glory, that he was in there. He dies at the battle at the end of the movie Glory. He dies in that battle. And he was buried in a mass grave, the same scene that's in the movie Glory. They had another son by the name of Alexander Newton. He hears about his brother dying, so then he joins the Connecticut 29th Colored Regiment, and he survives the war. He brought his younger brother with him, who was 15 years old at the time. They wouldn't give him a gun, but he became a servant to one of the officers, so he's on the road traveling. They speak. He wrote a book after the war was over, and he speaks about seeing Abraham Lincoln because the 29th were one of the first regiments to walk through the streets of Richmond while it was on fire at the end. And Abraham Lincoln came through to walk through the streets. He talks about seeing Abraham Lincoln. Today, their grave site in New Haven is a stone that nobody knows their story. So it fell over some 80 years ago, broke in half, and it's just buried into the ground. It's covered up with like grass. So my nonprofit, we not only found the descendants, so we're telling them all this information about how heroic their family was, and how they're aligned to the enslavement and the abolitionist movement. But we're also paying for the repair of their stone. We're also, since the Confederates buried their son in a mass grave, we've gotten the U.S. Office of Veterans Affairs to provide us with an honorary gravestone for their son Stephen, and we're going to have an unveiling on June 21st of this year to show this new stone and the repaired stone of these American heroes in my mind. So yeah, the families, I'm just now kind of getting them all, finding them and getting them all to know how heroic these people were.
So Wendy, John, obviously great work, John, you're doing, mentioned education, that when he goes in to do lectures to different student groups and different bodies of people and educates them about this history, they open their minds to it. What else do you think we should be doing in this moment? Because I just was amazed at how many people were really negative and oppositional even to the concept of this information being discovered, being disseminated, even being talked about. They found it offensive. They took it very personally. What can we do to kind of reverse some of that, to get people to feel proud about their ancestors and to learn, as John just said, some of the heroic things that our ancestors have done?
For us here at the local adult branch, it's all about changing the narrative. And I think when we start to tell our story, we tell a story of the celebration. I am a descendant, and my parents were born and raised in Tuskegee, Alabama. I never had a teacher of color since I've been in Connecticut. but we had a rich culture of understanding who we were and what we're doing, roots to Tuskegee University. So the pride was always there. And I think it's up to us at this point in our lives is to say it with pride, to say it with a celebratory pride. Yes, it was horrible. I'm not going to say that. But what did it take for them to persevere to have us still be here today? And how can we take that knowledge and apply it to our situation that we have right here today? So I think what you're doing, I applaud, KBLA for just taking on this conversation and keeping this narrative going because it's being heard. Our kids are very savvy. They are very social when it comes to media, and they seek truth. They seek
Yeah.
truth. And I think when said with the right voice and in the right tone, I think, recently just watching The Color Purple, not to give it a shout, but watching it again, the first time I was messed up. But the second time, I'm like, okay, I can receive this a lot better. So as we continue to, do the murals that we're doing in Waterbury, working with the museums and the other partners, Riverside Cemetery, the local librarians, we're going to find more allies and advocates than we're going to find opponents. And that's it.
No, I think that's the excellent points. How do you see this work being integrated, if you do, into the reparations movement that's happening all over this country? So I'm in California, and California went through a reparations process, a year of meeting, almost 2 years, issued a 1,000-page report. The Black Caucus for the state of California tomorrow is going to have a press conference where they're going to announce some bills that they plan to introduce that are related to the recommendations. And around the country, St. Louis, Detroit, Sacramento, Oakland, San Francisco, cities that have created their own reparations committees and commissions to study the vestiges of slavery. And one of the things that the California Commission did was to also go back and find some of the individuals that were brought into the state of California as enslaved people and looked at their contributions. So when we come forward, I want to talk about how you see this movement of discovery being related to the reparations movement, and also got to have you, John, give folks some tips on what they can do if they want to do this work for their own families. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
What's up, LA? This is John McKinney, your next district attorney. Voting is underway, and public safety is the top issue on the ballot. As a deputy district attorney for over 25 years, I know Los Angeles, and I know how to keep this community safe. And as an African American who lives and works in this community, I know the unique challenges we face. My promise to you is to ensure accountability, protect victims' rights, and give the underserved a voice. I'm John McKinney, and I ask for your vote for LA County District Attorney.
Tips to help improve your credit score in 2024. Establishing credit is an important key to achieving financial health, but building a credit history from scratch can feel challenging since you need credit to build credit. First, what does it mean to build credit? All consumers have a score between 300 and 850. You want your score to be as high as possible as lenders look at your credit score to make loan and credit decisions. A good credit score shows you have a track record of borrowing money responsibly. Remember, it's never too late to build or rebuild your credit. This segment is sponsored by JP Morgan Chase & Company.
KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Single Moms Planet is a nonprofit organization dedicated to uplifting under-resourced single mom business owners and working mothers nationwide. Single Moms Planet offers comprehensive programs of financial literacy, business development, mentorship, and entrepreneurial training. They provide education, accountability, and hope. Single Moms Planet was founded by model, TV personality, and producer Nefertari Plessy. Nefertari felt firsthand the challenges that face single moms as she was raised by a working single mother. She learned that the most disadvantaged group in the United States are single mom families. According to the U.S. Census, 30% live under the poverty line. So she decided to do something about it, along with co-founder Cole Patterson. Their goal is to end the poverty cycle in single mother households through education, opportunity, and networking, providing family and child enrichment programs for under-resourced single-parent families. Single Moms Planet serves over 10,000 single moms and their children each year. Studies show that business development and financial literacy provide a positive environment for children and families, exposing them to new possibilities and opportunities. To attend one of their fun events, make a donation, or get more information, or if you need help as a single mom, please visit singlemomsplanet.org. That's singlemomsplanet.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We've been having this very, very fascinating conversation about discovering who our ancestors are and not being afraid to embrace our history. And in fact, learning how to be proud of that history. John Mills, who's a software architect by training, has been doing the work of helping folks find their roots for decades now. And Wendy Tyson Wood is the president of an NAACP chapter in Waterbury, which is in Connecticut. And the two of them are working together to memorialize some of the enslaved folks who have been forgotten by this country. So I have two questions in the last minutes of this segment. One for you, Wendy, is about the reparations movement. So we see reparations committees being started, commissions being started. We know there's HR 40, which is a reparations study bill that's stuck right now in the House of Representatives. But do you see this work of uncovering our ancestors being tied into the reparations movement, and if so, how?
Yeah, most definitely. I think this work leads to policy changes, and it leads to a bigger arena. I just found there's a proposed bill in Connecticut introduced by Representative Nolan, an African-American representative in Connecticut, who proposed a bill for a task force in 2021 about reparations. We just went through some legislation that first allowed African-American and Hispanic studies to be in all high schools. Back in the day, the high school teacher just, if they were of color, you learned your history, but now we need some laws to do that. So this work brings upon a conversation. The conversation is then elevated to legislation and policy and changes. And that's where the dialogue is going to continue the movement in the reparations, because we first have to uncover. I mean, everyone, it's a big mystery. It's not a mystery to us, but it's a big mystery. But once we get it documented, and once it is presented, it cannot be refuted. So where I see the lead is the conversation starts, and then we start talking to the policymakers, and then we start issuing some legislation, and then that legislation leads us to some more actions and how we can get this done together, unified, not them versus us, but us together.
Great. So John, gotta pick your brain here. So we've heard of 23andMe and these other .com kind of investigatory sites where people can go, and it got real popular. People were doing their DNA testing, finding that they had cousins and aunts and uncles, finding their relatives. Is that the way you recommend someone go about trying to discover who their enslaved ancestors were?
I think the DNA testing is a tool that kind of helps along the process. I don't see it as the process. I think the process should probably start at home. It's like you should document what you know, and gather what you have, and talk to your own family members, the elders in your family, preferably interview them and record that stuff. See, I'm fortunate because my sister was very savvy back in the 80s, and she started recording people. She started video recording them once we got video cameras, right? And then she started doing that too. So we got audio tapes and videotapes from 30 plus years ago. But I think everybody should probably start doing that. But then once you've done that, formulate some questions. What don't you know that you want to know? Write those questions down. What are those things? And then once you've done that, I think that's when you have the questions. I think that's where you then start going to the kind of common sites, the ancestry.coms, the familysearch.orgs, and you can start playing around there. But if you want to get deeper, I would say go look in your local town, your local municipality, see if they have a genealogy course. They tend to have them. Like a 2-3 week course, you can learn more deeper detail to help you get to the answer to those questions that you still have after you've done your own homework at home. You could also, if you want to go even deeper, just hire a professional genealogist. You can go to bcgcertification.org, and then you can see all the certified genealogists across the country and find one to hire. You can hit me up at alexbrienne.org, or I have another site, the Millions, plural, the millions.org. You can go there and hit me up and I can help direct you. But again, that's the professional route. Those
Yeah, I was gonna
other
say, a lot of folks don't have resources, and I know
Right.
those DNA online sites can be kind of costly for people. So if
Right.
you are sitting at home and want to find out how, you can do this work without, you don't have the money to spend on one of those sites, what do you suggest?
Yeah, absolutely. I think your own homework at home. And after you get your own homework done at home, then I think spend something nominal just to get your own kind of understanding of what it is. And again, local municipalities, local towns tend to have like introductory genealogical courses that are relatively inexpensive. And I think that will then get you the path into where you should go from there. I mean, there's lots of places that will give you information. Libraries have microfilms. You can go to your state libraries and they will help you start tracing down land records and census documents. And you don't have to spend those costs on those sites, but you got to be kind of savvy about where to go. And if you go to your state library, they may help you. But I tend to recommend to people just find like a real simple, short, inexpensive course to kind of just get you started. After you've done all your own homework, you've interviewed your own people, you've written down all the stuff and you've got these specific things you want to answer. Where am my great-great-grandfather from? Who was my great-great-grandmother married to? Like once you've got real questions and you know what you don't know, then start that path.
Love that information. I love that advice that you've given, because that means anybody can do this. This isn't just for rich people. This isn't just, for people with a lot of money. You don't have to have a bunch of letters or alphabet behind your names to do this. Anybody can go to the library. There are librarians there that are trained that can help you on this search. And a lot of these courses, I would imagine, YouTube University probably has some free courses that can get you started, and there are junior colleges in every community in this country. So there are ways that people can, trace this information, get this information. And I think one thing that we don't do enough of is starting now. Your sister, as you said, was very savvy, started 30 years ago. I have an aunt, she turned 90 2 years ago, and I took the time just to interview her to write her life story in a book that we were going to use. It's like a booklet for her birthday party. And just that, learning about her history, knowing that there are great grandchildren that she has and great great grandchildren who won't know that. But I mean, there are ways that all of us can start to help tell our family stories by, as you said, asking those questions, interviewing folks, videotaping folks, writing it down, collecting those old pictures, because that history is so important. I'm thinking of my grandmother and great grandmother who have now passed on that I did not take advantage of. But when you know better, you do better. So I know better now, so I have to do better. Can't worry about what I didn't do. But all of us have an opportunity right now in this moment to become, historians of our family's rich history. Because as you said, Wendy, as we start to unveil this history and know this history, we can talk about policy. We can talk about, changing things and hopefully changing the hearts and minds of people. I'm so grateful to both of you. I thank the Washington Post for writing this amazing article about you, John. That's how I found you. Reading is essential. So you learn a lot by reading the paper every day. And that's how I found out about your incredible story. And you're in that article as well, Wendy. Good luck with the work you both are doing in Connecticut. Can't wait to see what happens as you guys become a model for the rest of the country and those folks doing this work. So thanks to both of you for joining me today. We are out of time, but don't touch the bell. The next voice that you hear will be Robin Ayers and